And we're live. Welcome, everybody, here to the Lakers Lounge Podcast. I'm Anthony Irwin, Lakers insider for Lakers Daily. And today on the show, we have one of my favorite guests back. We were talking before we went live about how impressed I am with he and Tom and, their whole community, their ability to kind of make analytics entertaining, go in depth, fully nerd out, and still develop a community around that. That is really, really difficult to do. Cranjis has been on the show before. He's been great when he was on the show before. And he actually had a theory the other day, or I guess it was about a week or so ago, about LeBron and the position that he played. And it was something that I was thinking about anyway. So we're going to talk about LeBron's position. We're going to talk about Media Day. We're going to talk about JJ Redick's coaching outlook and all of that good stuff. But Cranjis, first off, before we even get going, thank you very much for hopping on, man. How you holding up?
Yeah, thanks for having me, Anthony. I've been doing well. I've done my best to rest and enjoy the off season and just dabble a little bit here and there. Came up with the motion offense. Figured out a way to try to grade set plays with the rubric. We've been doing a lot of good work at B-Ball Index behind the scenes that folks will be able to see sometime soon. I'm hoping in the next couple of weeks, some big improvements and changes there. And I don't know, just trying to help the game, stay around the game, but have been fairly relaxed on the Lakers side. So I'm re-energized, ready to get back into it. And I think this is a perfect way for that.
Yeah, I don't know if we've talked about this before, but I did a little bit of coaching before I started doing any of this. And I had it in my mind that I was going to design basically like my own system or whatever. And it was a fun kind of read and react kind of system. A lot of spread principles and stuff like that. And what I didn't quite realize, and this is where knowing your personnel is important. Like 15, 16, 17-year-old girls were not prepared for a read and react offense. They needed to be told in this really regimented offense where to be, how to do this, what to do here, and all of that stuff. And so as somebody who is dabbled in that stuff, I'd be fascinated to see. I would love to have a completely separate conversation about the offense, the motion offense that you put together. What without getting too deep into it and too deep into the weeds, what are you thinking there?
So I generally don't like motion offenses, and I don't think that they're a good fit for higher levels of basketball. Just with, I don't know, usually it's the thing you run when you don't have a shot clock, just so you can have stuff happen indefinitely at the high school level. And when you got a shot clock, you have to be more precise and pinpoint with what you're doing. And I think a lot of them fall short there. And in a way, they're too predictable. What I put together, I think, answers those things, and I see as a good kind of capstone project. It's able to, with any motion, you have to build out your rules. So like if this person passes from here to here, this is what happens. If you, feed the post, here's what happens. Things like that. And I'll just say that I was able to work in some of my favorite individual concepts, like split cuts and Spain pick and rolls and hammer flare screens and things like that. I just tried to find all the things I really enjoy that I thought would translate well, and then mash it all together. And then the tricky part is making sure it flows and it actually truly has some continuity. And it took a little bit of tweaking, but I was able to make it work out. So yeah, I'll post some more about it on Twitter or X or whatever it's called. And if there are any coaches out there that are interested, I've already shared the PDFs with some of their coaches. So I'd be happy to share that out if anyone wants to give it a try. But it's a lot of pick and roll, a lot of post up if you want it, but you don't have to use it. And it adapts to your personnel a bit, which I like.
That's the biggest key. And it's honestly it's a pretty good segue into some of the stuff that we're going to be talking today about how like to me, the thing that separates even good coaches from really good or great coaches is the great ones adapt to whatever the situation is, their personnel, the point in their career that their personnel is in, right? Like that's the part of Phil Jackson's career that I think gets kind of overlooked is like everybody thinks, yeah, he had Michael Jordan, and he had Scottie Pippen, and he had Dennis Rodman, and he had Kobe, and he had Shaq, and then he had Kobe again, and he had Powell. But for one thing, he had Michael while Michael was transitioning from like this to that point. The media considered Michael kind of an underachiever. He's never going to win kind of a player, selfish player, to, he wins those, 6 championships in 7 years or whatever it was. And over that time, right, becomes a very different player as those years go on. And obviously you have Phil winning with Shaq and Kobe, but even in the three-peat era, you had 3 very different rosters within the three-peat. And then Phil comes back and wins 2 more championships with Kobe and Pau in a completely different iteration of the Lakers, all the while using, triangle, the triangle, and then triangle kind of theory, I guess ideologies and stuff like that, and became a little bit more flexible there at the end. When they had like Lamar and Powell playing, and that was a very different system than he was playing when it was a one center kind of a situation with Shaq. It's just, to me, that's the part of it that I think Phil doesn't quite get enough credit for. And to find out that a system can have that kind of flexibility, that's fascinating. That's really cool. And speaking of like what we're talking about today, Lakers Media Day happened just now, and a few of the players couldn't quite help themselves but throw a little shade Darvin Ham's direction as somebody who is kind of staunch and unmoving in his ideologies in coaching the Lakers last year. D'Angelo Russell basically called him unorganized, especially compared to what JJ Redick has done thus far. For one, Tim, how much time did you spend like paying attention to media day and stuff like that? And two, that was a narrative that I did a lot of reporting on. You spoke about a ton last year. The Lakers kind of inconsistency with running sets. Even if they were successful sets, they would just kind of wander away from them, and then they would come back to them. And then you'd find all of us kind of saying like, why can't we just do that more often? The players obviously felt that way. They said so again today. But how did you take in last year? Now that we have now that the offseason, all of that is behind us, how many remote controls did you go through last season?
Many. I'll hit things one at a time. Phil Jackson, fantastic coach, super flexible, the anti-Nate McMillan, if you will. I checked out a little bit of media day, mostly observed it through what you and others were tweeting about. I did not watch it myself. But from that, the D'Lo's comment about the lack of structure defensively matches up with what I was being told, where I was asking questions about what are the principles that they're running? It's really hard to tell. And I was told they don't have any. And this was 50 games into the season. And so that was a little bit eye-opening to me. I expect that there will be an actual plan. Whether it's the best plan, I don't know. But as long as you can get everyone pulling in the same direction tactically from an execution standpoint, you should fare better than if you're just out there, vibing. Last season, as you mentioned, was very, very frustrating. I talked a lot about the lack of what I perceive to be as the root cause issues to me seem to be a lack of structure with systems and processes internally. It didn't seem like the team tracked how often they ran sets, which sets they ran, how good the sets performed, when they were using the sets. And that's all stuff that should be bare minimum sort of stuff. And I have a tracker that I use where I log every play the team runs, and it spits out all that, all those KPIs. How often are we calling plays? This upcoming season, it'll have how good were the plays we were calling now that I'm able to grade each individual play. And we actually saw last season, the play calling itself was much worse than the playbook was. They might have had, they had 402 different plays that they used throughout the 90 or so games that they played between preseason, regular season, in-season tournament, play-in and playoffs. And they were pretty consistently using pretty basic stuff instead of the cooler, fun things that they had built in. And that was infuriating. And then they also didn't seem to have a good grasp on what should guys' jobs be. And I think of all of the things we do at B-Ball Index, one of the things I really like is we look at data that tells me what is a player doing on offense and what is a player doing on defense, and we categorize them into jobs. What is your job on offense? What is your role on offense? What is your role on defense? And when you look at those roles and match them up with the skill sets for players, it didn't really make sense. Some of the jobs they had guys doing just didn't make any sense. Torian Prince, stationary shooter. Like, you can have your issues with Torian. His job should be run around off ball screens, and that's not a thing they had him do, and therefore he wasn't as impactful as he could have been. They had Christian Wood and Jackson Hayes as anchor bigs, like only playing drop coverage, and that is not a good way to use either of them. And that's something that if you're going to bring them to the team, you should have known that. Like, that should have been part of the pitch to them when you're signing them is, we know this is what you're good at. Here's what how you're going to use you and how it's going to make you look good. Either they broke a bunch of promises, or that's really not part of their pitch process, or there's misalignment between the front office and the coaching staff there, because you can almost name any player on the roster and I can come up with, like, here from a minutes or a role standpoint or a scheme fit standpoint, how they were not set up well to succeed. And it stunk and it was infuriating. And there were still things the team did well and still things the coaching staff did well. But moving to this year, I'm, having to try to reconcile all that and try to re-baseline and say, all right, well, where's the talent of this team? And what could the talent of this team have done last year if it was coached well? And then make that my starting point to then apply JJ Redick and his staff, rather than, I think last year's results were depressed a bit because of the coaching, and making that my starting point and saying, well, I don't know if JJ Redick, can give us an extra 5-10 wins or whatever. So it's bad. I broke many theoretical controllers. I cannot believe I spent so much time logging every single play, because it was a really frustrating year. And I feel like my content ended up becoming the rudimentary, like, hey, when you run plays you do well, please run plays. And just telling that to everyone I possibly could, in the hopes that they would do the thing that worked. And they refused to do it. Credit to them for being stubborn.
Let's see where he got him. It was something that, like, one of the things that the longer that we, and I say we as in like those of us who cover this team, have podcasts, blog, whatever, the longer that we do it, the more I think our content kind of seeps into each other's. And it's become like really a cool kind of community onto its own. And, one of the things that I kept on, pointing to last year was how often, because like I had scouts tell me, on the record, which was crazy to me, but they were like on the record saying like, yeah, they run good stuff. We probably should scout more for it, but we also know that they'll run a cool play or they'll run a good set and they'll get a bucket off of it, and then we won't see it again for the rest of the game. And that was just wild to watch. And I think, one of the things that I really was at the forefront of my mind as I was reporting that stuff, as I was talking about it on the show, was like, normally, like, even if they're lying, Tim, you'll get players go on the record or tweet out or something like that. If a coach is getting shat on as much as Darvin was getting shat on over the course of the year, in reporting, in takes, in opinions, in tweets and stuff like that, you'll get at least like one or two players or a few players over the course of the year, tweet out like, oh, I guess anybody can just have opinions on basketball now, or the cap emojis on reporting that they don't like, even if it isn't true, that they'll say that it's cap just for the sake of what's going on in the locker room. Not once did we get any kind of pushback to any of the reporting. And some of it was pretty like outlandish, true, but outlandish nonetheless reporting. And it was just like, the players just like, and they were kind of, by not saying anything, kind of confirming it over the course of the year. And then today, at media day, they really confirmed it. They were like, actually, y'all didn't go far enough. Like, you guys should kept it going, keep the energy over the course of the year. One of the things, though, that I've been really kind of struggling with after JJ Redick got hired was trying to figure out what his outlook is going to be, what he's going to bring to the table, and trying to forecast if he's actually going to be any good at this. A lot of that is like, I've seen various, accounts and stuff saying this is what he's going to do, this is what he's going to do, and this is what it's going to do. And I tend to think that just kind of falls in line with how that person sees the game, and they wind up just kind of hoping that JJ Redick sees it in similar fashion. How have you specifically, though, tried to forecast what you think we're going to see from JJ Redick this year?
I think your observations very astute. He's kind of like a cat in that, like, what is the thing? Cats can't like emote, and so people just kind of see what they want to see.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of that, and I think fans just generally like to be hopeful, and
Yeah.
sometimes the line between like fan and analyst, or analyst and like journalist, which I certainly am not, get blurred a bit, and so it's challenging to know what the true analysis is or should be. From my perspective, I did all the research I could in terms of listening to his podcasts and, taking notes, and like from an X's and O standpoint, here are the things he values, here are the things he cares about when it comes to running a team. From all, I wrote down every single concept, every offensive, like off ball screen type that he mentioned on his pod with LeBron and all these different things, just trying to get a feel for what he talks about most should be where he's most comfortable. The things he never talks about, I'm expecting maybe he's less comfortable. And from all those different things, like, he's obviously a really good communicator. That's clear to me.
Yep.
And killing it at media day, killing it in these press conferences. Of course he is. Like, that doesn't tell me that he's going to be a good coach, but he should do a good job, like, with us, with the media, because that's what his job was. Now, in terms of the specifics, I can see certain types of things I expect he'll probably do. I'm told that the pitch to players has been like 80 is going to be used more in like a Sabonis, Jokic kind of way. Austin is going to be someone that's used in a lot more off-ball screens. It seems every player he talks to, he tells them he wants them to take more threes. So there's some like general things I get. I'd say from what he shared, I mostly agree with the things he's saying. And a lot of it's not like, hey, I want to do this because I like it. It's, hey, I want to crash from the corners because the teams that are good at offensive rebounding crash from the corners, even if you're a 5-out team. And like, that's the kind of approach that I try to have when I'm like, all right, well, why was Utah, who plays 5-out, such a good offensive rebounding team? Oh, this is how. And he, separately, independently, is like looking at that same sort of stuff and coming up with conclusions. So there's some process, there's some best practicing, which I like. I think it's important to understand the context of what first time coaches have looked like. And if you look at the, let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 of them throughout NBA history, after like player coaches went away, and you try to look at the ones that were able to survive, like, let's say 3 seasons and have a win percentage that would be 55% or up, which would be a roughly top 10 among current coaches, only 2 of those guys hit that mark. And there's Steve Kerr and Larry Bird. And everyone else, some of them ended up being successful coaches. Jason Kidd, Mark Jackson, Doc Rivers. Some of these guys did well elsewhere later. But it is such a challenging job to have to figure out everything immediately. And so that has helped. I think that context has helped me put things into perspective. And like, I'm not expecting him to be an above average NBA coach year one, but that doesn't mean that I don't think long-term he'll develop into a solid one. So I think, to me, part of my analysis with him is, I don't know that he's the right fit if you think this team can contend, because by the time he should be better than some of these alternatives, LeBron's going to be retired, and, you're going to be in a different window. I don't know if it will be a title window, but it won't be this one. And a big issue that I had was, I don't expect to see a really strong staff come with him because of what his coaching connections look like, which are non-existent. And they didn't.
Being honest.
This is, I have done as much research as I can do. I've talked to as many people behind the scenes as I can, and I am very down on this assembled staff. And it's like their plan C or plan D or plan E hires that they've been able to grab, and that extends to the G League staff as well.
That. Like, it's like they wanted Borrego and then they couldn't get Borrego. They wanted Dudley and they couldn't get Dudley, and they wanted they wanted, like, I don't know how many names. They wanted Jacques Vaughn and they couldn't get Jacques Vaughn, and they wanted, you could find any number of names. We could list any number of names here, and the guys that they finally arrived at were all like, plan C at best.
Yeah, they were all available. They'd all been fired. They, like, Harding was the only one that they didn't like pick up from unemployment, and Sacramento had 3 open coaching spots with their parent team, and she was not seriously considered for any. She did well in the G League, but she's a development coach, and I expect her to perform in that capacity. But they're all was an OC at an NBA level for 1 year and got fired. Their DC, his whole thing is being stubborn. And he's been bottom 6 in pick and roll coverage versatility 5 of his 7 seasons as a head coach, Nate McMillan. And the game-to-game versatility is really low. So he like plays one way and doesn't adjust. And, not a big switch guy. There are certain things that I don't think translate to success in today's NBA that he had success with like 8 years ago. So I'm worried there. Brooks, his one time as an associate head coach, lead assistant, was like literally last year, and he got fired from that job in Portland. Yeah. And that was their answer for, we need to revamp the coaching staff. Let's fire this guy. So that worries me. I'm told he had a lot of his duties stripped along the way. So you pulled together, like ideally, you're the Lakers. Like, be serious. You should be able to grab people that have done the jobs you're hiring them for at the NBA level successfully.
Yeah.
And 0 of these people you can point to and say, I like that hire because they just did that job well, in Phoenix or in Dallas or Minnesota or wherever it happens to be. And this is not the way it would have looked if the team went a different direction and went and grabbed one of those top assistants for Denver or Minnesota or one of those other teams that would have poached a lot of those folks with them. So that to me is a big year one difference. But that doesn't mean that long-term JJ can't figure things out, assemble a better staff over time as there's more trust built into the fact that maybe this is more of a stable job. And maybe, if he impresses people, like, he's going to be able to pull better coaches. But this staff as assembled will not win a title. And I feel really strongly about that because they're not going to make the most of the roster. I'm hopeful, but I think realistically, this is not an area where I expect it to be an asset to the team.
Yeah, over my time in doing this, I've developed, I've developed some from friendships and with assistant coaches and stuff like that. And the people that I was talking to over the course of the search for JJ Redick, which I'm using that phrase on purpose. It was the search for JJ Redick. Like they embarked on this by kind of having JJ. They were zeroed in on JJ. Was the phrasing I used, and then just happened to be reused by another reporter who will remain nameless, probably going to be at ESPN soon. And then, we were, watching that take place, and you had the whole Dan Hurley thing happen, but they arrived back at JJ Redick. And then when they hired JJ, a bunch of my friends were reaching out, or in the conversations I was having was like, no, nobody's going to go work there. They don't pay. In the way that the Lakers should pay, not even as far as like you're the Lakers, you have money to burn. It's like we're expected to live in Southern California off of less money than other assistant coaches are making elsewhere. You fired Frank Vogel 2 years after winning a championship, and then you fired Darvin Ham 2 years after winning or making it to the Western Conference Finals. So we don't know how much, and when a head coach gets fired, everybody else gets to go too. And so assistant coaches are looking at the situation. They're saying like, we'll see how things go here with JJ for a little bit. And maybe if it looks like he's actually as secure as Rob Pelinka wants us to think, then, we can revisit, which role makes the most sense for us at that time. But that's not for years down the road. And essentially where you land with this coaching staff as it's currently assembled is like, they have that new Marvels movie, right? Or the new Marvel movie where it's like the G team, of all the kind of miscast and stuff like that. That's essentially the coaching staff that the Lakers have compiled. My last thing on the coaching front here is that I'm hoping that JJ's, because the Lakers do need to prove to coaches out there that they are more secure than they actually, than they have been to this point. And I would imagine that would allow JJ to, do some interesting things with the rotation, with personnel, with approach to the game, overall culture, all of those things that may kind of be somewhat out of the box. If the slate was clean and there was one kind of out of left field decision that you would be pulling for JJ Redick to make, is there anyone in particular that you would hope for?
From a coach standpoint?
Yeah, like, whether it's like a system that he would run or a role for a player that people haven't considered. So like, here's my example. I've been hoping, and it's not going to happen. Obviously, they've announced the starting lineup for the upcoming season. I've been hoping that D'Angelo Russell would come off of the bench and Max Christie would start in his place. It would be completely out of left field, and I get why JJ would go with this group of starters to kick off the season to try to get on their good graces as compared to Darvin previously. But I think that, it's in the Lakers' best interest to, kind of minimize how much they rely on D'Angelo Russell on a day-to-day basis. And one way to do that is to kind of start bringing him off the bench. And also you need to find out who Max Christie is. I think of your shooting guards, he's at least theoretically, the most equipped to be the better two-way impact of the guys that they have. I would go in that direction. They obviously aren't. But if you were JJ Redick and you had every opportunity in front of you with the notion that like you are going to be more secure than most first year coaches, what's one thing that you would maybe consider in that kind of a spot?
I'll say I agree with your part. Well, I think I agree with splitting D'Lo and Austin. I think that is a backcourt that I'd prefer to split up, and I think that would do a lot of good for the team defensively. And I think each of them offensively are reaching a point where they can be a lead ball handler, or at least D'Lo can, and then maybe Austin, you try to have more LeBron out there with him. The other lineup related, rotation related thing that I have been mulling over is the idea of LeBron defensively playing a three, and not just that on its own, but pairing that with adding more size to the lineups. And internally, the only option for that is Christian Wood, but it would allow you the Braun Wood AD front court would give you a lot of collective size. It would give you good rim protection. You would be able to like hedge if you wanted to. You could stick Wood at the 5, have him be the guy hedging, AD on the weak side. Especially McMillan loves to hedge, so I expect they're going to do this a bit. And if they're tiny and you don't have good size out there, you're going to get lit up. So having AD on the back line, being able to erase 4v3s or a 2v1 skip pass, like that should fare well for the team. He actually had that helper role from a defensive role standpoint the title year, and then also the year after the title, which I think honestly, like if he didn't get injured, they were a title caliber team or a finals caliber team. He has not had that role since. And I think we've seen, struggles partially because of that. This would be a way to get LeBron into a better role for him in a number of different ways. And, there are certain weaknesses of that approach, but I think just having more rim protection so that even if LeBron does get beat on ball, there's good rim protection behind him, no matter where AD is. Even if Austin or D'Lo, if you do want to keep starting those two, do get beat on the perimeter, like you've got really strong rim protection. And I think that more, that size approach while still maintaining spacing is really important. And it's something that LeBron at the 3 with Rui or Vando at the 4, who are not good rim protectors for 4s, does not really do for you. So at a team level, I like that. And then for LeBron specifically, I mean, I can get into it in a minute, but there are a whole lot of reasons why it didn't work well for him, or it's trending towards not working well for him. And as he ages, this is one key area that I see is dropping off for him. And we've seen some of it already. It's just like off-ball defense is not something people tend to notice as much as on-ball defense. So it went a little bit under the radar, but his impact dropped off last year and it dropped off the year before. And a big piece of that was this off-ball defense. And I think if you're the team, you can't operate like fans. You have to get out in front of it. You got to do the best thing for you in 2024, 2025. And you can't play him like he's, 5, 6, 7, 8 years younger than he is right now.
That's a great job by you to make this segue as smooth as this is, because this is actually the reason I reached out to you in the first place. Was consensus to this point on LeBron is that he has to play power forward because he doesn't have the foot speed to keep up with small forwards. You actually outlined, I thought, in great detail why, while some of that might be true, he's actually hurting you in these other ways. In particular, do you want to highlight what those ways are that LeBron is hurting you defensively at power forward, maybe more than he would at small forward?
Sure. Yeah, I think if we just look at like the jobs for a 4 defensively compared to a 3, what we tend to see is fours are asked to box out a whole lot more. They are asked to do a lot more damage on the boards. From a rim protection standpoint, they're averaging 8.2 contests at the rim per game or per 75 possessions compared to 5.3. So, a good bit more. They're defending an ISO about as frequently as threes. So there isn't actually all that much of a difference from an ISO standpoint. And in terms of the percentage of the time you're on court and needing to defend an ISO for either of those roles, it's about 3% of the time. So it's not all that often, but just the general rotations, tagging roll men, trapping the box when you rotate over to stop a drive. Those are pretty long rotations. You're going to have to run. You got to get over there. And it's important to have someone who is very active and mobile and willing to do that. And LeBron wasn't. LeBron has not been. And he is like the least active helper that's in a helper role, basically. We have a defensive involvement rate stat at B-Ball Index. And last season, LeBron would rank third lowest among the 4,653 players over the past 11 seasons that have played 200 minutes or more. Like, really bad. In the year prior, he wasn't too far behind. So, like, the job requires you to do these things to succeed, and he already isn't. So this isn't me like saying, hey, I think old man LeBron will suddenly be bad at this. He's already bad at it. And that off-ball defense hurts things. So when someone does get beat on the perimeter and the other team gets a dunk, usually, where do your eyes go to? It's like, come on, D'Lo. Come on, Austin. What are you doing? It's not that way when AD standing there, forces the kick out, and then the team's able to recover. You're not as worried about those little breakdowns. But when your backline defense isn't defending, every breakdown is resulting in better shots. And that becomes a problem. But the fingers get pointed at LeBron's teammates, not him. And so to me, that's super important. And then like post defense and boxing out, like when I played, I was a big man. Those are the things that I would say are the most exhausting things to do if you're going to do them well. Yep. And compare that to threes, you don't have to do post defense all that much. And the reason like JJ keeps talking about how the Lakers need to be crashing from the corners with their wings is because generally like the norm in the NBA right now is when a shot goes up, wings stand still and their defenders can chill. They're not needing to box out. And so there's a big difference between what that norm is right now for threes compared to fours and fives where you're needing to box out like every play. So the load on LeBron in terms of like, if he does the job well, it's going to be strenuous. And I think that takes away from his offense. And even as is, he hasn't been doing the job well, and that hurts the team. So I think just getting him into a role where, yeah, he's going to get burnt a little bit more often on the perimeter. But even when he does, as long as that guy that you're putting into the rotation as the four has like Christian Wood, he's a good rim protector. He's an excellent rim protector as a 4. AD's an excellent rim protector as a 5. And LeBron's an excellent rim protector as a 3. LeBron as a 4 as a rim protector, not all that great. And Wood as a 5 is fine. But if you can slot them correctly, even when you do have those breakdowns, which is I think what people are most scared about, because most of the focus defensively is for one-on-one defense, you're set up to be better off, whether it's LeBron or AD or Wood or D'Lo or Reeves or whoever getting beat on the perimeter, because you are so much more likely to have a rim protector there to erase things and give you a chance to recover.
Yeah, it's like in essence, then it sounds like, LeBron at the 3 has fewer ways to hurt you than he would at the 4 defensively, right?
Right.
And also importantly, LeBron at the 3 opens up some personnel options, whether it be for this roster as it's currently built, but then also like in trades and stuff, because the types of players that the Lakers have been looking for, like they've been kind of focused on these athletic 3s. But like if you're able to bring in kind of a bigger, more physical 4 or a 5 that you're able to play next to AD, then that really opens up your options. And we'll always, I think, have the what if of gosh darn it, the
Miles Turner.
in it. What's that?
Miles Turner.
Thank you. Yeah. And how different, talk about a sliding door opportunity there, a sliding door moment there, where if they just bring him in and then you basically keep AD at the 4 and you, keep LeBron at the 3, and then you have this perfect, kind of like if you were to design him in a lab absolutely perfect player for those two front court guys. I guess that'll, we'll never get to see it unless we're playing 2K.
Mhm.
But what do you think though? Like, there's a theory out there that AD at the 5 has actually been the reason, or one of the big reasons why his shot has fallen off of a cliff. Do you buy into that at all?
I looked at that and took a look at like result based like shooting percentage data. I took a look at shot making data that adjusts for shot quality. There has been no correlation. There has been no like when he plays bigger, he's going to shoot worse or better. So I do not see that as the problem or an answer for the Lakers. I just think AD is not a very good jump shooter. And most seasons of his career, he has not been a very good jump shooter. And even not very good jump shooters will have stretches of time where they shoot good or shoot well. We saw with like Cam Reddish. Cam Reddish had stretches where he was a good 3-point shooter. But
Yep.
as long as you keep that sample size large, it's going to get back to the truth. And the truth is he's not very good, and AD has not been very good. So unless they change something with his form itself, and I'm not a shot form doctor to have a good perspective there, like I do not expect that to suddenly alter things. So no, the data doesn't say so, and I would agree with the data.
Yeah, I think I mostly agree with you there. I think it's an oversimplification of the various factors that go into shooting. I think that, a lot of people, like, this kind of goes back to what we talked about with JJ Redick, right? Where people who would want to have AD at the 4 are going to feel a certain way about his shooting ability at the 4 versus his shooting ability at the 5. And how, so that, we talked about that previously. But the one place where I do think that there's a potential for some credence is that, like, AD, at the 5, you know, involves a lot more of the boxing out that you talked about, the post defense that you talked about. And that could potentially, and, JJ Redick said he had a theory. He didn't give it away, but he had a theory on why AD's shot fell off of a cliff. It might be your theory, right? It might just be that AD shot out of his mind for a little bit and then came back to earth since. But I do think there might be, and then also, like, when it comes to bulking up to play the position, we've seen in the past guys bulk up and have it affect their shot. Now we've seen guys bulk up and have it not affect their shot, right? Most notably Steph. If you look at him now versus when he was in the league, he's like a completely different human being. And obviously it didn't have an impact on him there. I just think there's more margin for error for a shooter of Steph's ilk compared to AD. So there are some potential theories out there. The reason I bring this up is that, for that concern that, well, what happens if you take away AD's at least theoretical floor spacing at the 5? What does that do? When in reality, it's just that. It's just theoretical. He doesn't really space the floor at the 5. So I'm actually more open to playing even a non-floor spacing 5 next to AD, because you at least get the defensive upgrade, even if it might hurt you a little bit offensively. What do you think about that idea there?
Say that last part again. What?
So, like, I'm open to playing a more traditional center next to AD, even if that center doesn't necessarily space the floor. Um, and I have no concern whatsoever over losing AD's quote unquote floor spacing at the 5, because it's basically non-existent. And I would rather get the kind of defensive and physicality advantages of having, that super bulked up front court. Whereas what the Lakers have basically been doing lately, they bring in these theoretical floor spacers at the 5 who don't actually space the floor all that much, or they have AD more at the 5 and play these really, really small lineups that also don't stretch out defenses. I would rather just go back to the strengths that we know that AD and LeBron provide, which is that bigger, stronger, faster kind of approach to the sport.
I think it would hurt offensively. Defensively, I think is the value. Like, and this has been a
Yeah.
debate with AD forever. Is if he's a 4, great, we're going to be better defensively because you've got an extra big body out there. If he's your 5, you should be better offensively because there should be more of a spaced floor. we have seen throughout his entire career when he is playing next to another non-shooter, whether it be like a bruising big or it's a Jared Vanderbilt, like when he's out there with one of those guys, he becomes much more of a jump shooter and he gets to the rim a lot less.
Yeah.
And I think it is really important to keep the rim a priority and keep that open. And so offensively, that gives me some heartburn. If that big guy is a good lob threat and you can get some of that like vertical spacing sort of gravity, where like you can't leave them or we're just going to throw the lob up and they're going to finish it over you, that helps alleviate some of it. If you're going to be super heavy into off-ball screening, like there are ways to work around this a bit. But that would be the concern. I do think like if they're traded for like a Walker Kessler, like he and AD defensively would be so phenomenal that like it would be worth it
Yeah.
offensively. And Kessler's a good enough like lob threat that like I'm not concerned about there being some overlap there. I don't know if it's what you want to go with as your base look, but I'm okay with like saying we're gonna win a rock fight because we have two elite defensive bigs. I don't
That's
know
kind
that,
of basically where I was going, is
but we
that
don't have
like
that. We don't have
they
that guy.
yeah. Well, because like essentially what I'm saying is that like in trying to kind of straddle that fence, it's you can actually zoom out and apply this to the organization as a whole, and that like by trying to straddle the fence and be competitive now while also remaining flexible in the future, they've managed to do neither particularly well. And I think with what the Lakers have basically done with Anthony Davis, and I think this has a lot to do with some of his like rating, impact rating type numbers, is that like they've managed to not necessarily generate the kind of spacing that you would like to have with AD playing the five, while also being so small so that you don't really get the benefit of AD, the destroyer of worlds on the weak side. And
Mhm.
if the Lakers were to bring in a better, and like that's what I it's something I've written about and spoken about on the show before. Is I thought it was really funny how the guys that LeBron would take a pay cut for were Klay Thompson, future Hall of Famer, James Harden, future Hall of Famer, and Jonas Valanciunas. Um, and that like really spoke to me, that like he and AD have kind of put their heads together and said like, no, we want to get back to being bigger. And Jonas was the free agent du jour, and that's where they arrived at. And I think that's something that, in terms of personnel, or approach to the sport, I don't know how well that may jive with JJ Redick's approach to the sport, or his kind of um, how he kind of sees how things should kind of play out. But that's something that like I would like to see the Lakers get back to. It, the spacing wasn't great with Dwight. The spacing wasn't great with JaVale, but it was like they were so great defensively that you could kind of get away with some of the offensive limitations. And I think that's something that I would like to see the Lakers kind of pursue a little bit more.
Well, I mean, the Lakers were better that title year when AD was playing the five.
Yeah,
Like
true. Also
they
true.
were more successful. It was they were good enough when those guys were out there, but I mean, they both had poor offensive impact and for a reason. And that reason was when they were out there, things really got mucked up. And when AD was the five those seasons, they had elite perimeter defense with Caruso and KCP and Avery Bradley and like younger LeBron. I say younger LeBron, but relatively younger LeBron than where he is today. Like Kuzma, like they were able to do things then that when AD is out there in a small lineup these days with this group, you can't do. Like you can't have AD as the
Yeah.
five and then not have rim protection and size with your threes and fours, and then have like a D'Lo Reeves backcourt and expect to be strong defensively. And so I'm with you in terms of I'd love to add that size. To me, like Christian Wood is the only internal option, and he's coming off of his only, and by only I mean like his only bad 3-point shot making season of his career. Every other season of his career, he's been like a really strong return on his shot quality sort of guy. And we got to see him at his worst. I think we will see a bounce back. Like we have to see a bounce back there, and that fit should work really well. And if you're gonna like pursue that kind of player, like Wendell Carter Jr. is the kind of guy I'd be looking to trade for. Or like even
So
if you
maybe the
try to go
Lakers, they called Orlando for him. They had lengthy conversations with Orlando for him.
Yeah, and like that's the kind of guy I think you need to go for. And we've seen the front office try to do that. Like they tried Gasol, and honestly, like the Gasol thing worked for the most part. He's not someone you want to be able to like switch on to campaign, and we saw that in the playoffs. But like doing what he's good at, it kind of worked, and they didn't use him as enough as a pick and pop option. He was picking and rolling way too much. Like I don't think they used him well offensively, and that limited his impact a little bit. But that they tried Mo Bamba, and I don't think he ever really got a real shot. I don't know what it looked like behind the scenes, but he wasn't someone that we saw much of a sample size of in actual basketball with the Lakers. But he has been another one of those guys that profiles as big rim protector that can space the floor. Miles Turner was the guy they were interested in, and he checks these boxes. We didn't see them pull the trigger there. So like they've tried to go for this kind of guy. And I see that as being like a way to, if they would have gotten Turner, like Turner AD is a backcourt or a front court that sets you up for the future. And defensively, you're going to be really good every year. And like a year from now, when LeBron probably retired and not on this team, like you're set up well defensively, and you've got, you can still run things around 80 offensively with great spacing with that kind of duo. I don't think Christian Wood is that caliber of guy. And so I'm in this uncomfortable position where like, I'd love to run that. I want to see it. I think it'll work. But at the same time, I don't trust that he's going to get 30 minutes a game and perform well and be a reliable option. So
Yeah.
outside of them trading for that skill set, I don't see this as being like a core piece of what they'll be able to do this year. And so we might have to wait another year before we see this potential turn into reality.
Yeah, the good news is, none of this core is very old, and we have plenty of time to wait. There's no downside there.
Isn't it crazy, Anthony? Like they bring in this coaching staff, and everything I'm hearing from like owner, GM, coach, players is like player development, and like we're gonna develop these young players. You don't have a young team. Like this is a middle-aged team from a basketball like NBA standpoint. I don't know what we're talking about here. Yeah, you do have some young guys, but they're not ones that like, I don't know. This isn't like OKC a couple of years ago. You grabbed a coach that fits like a rebuild, and you're not there yet. You need to like wait a year. And so I think they're going to be in this in-between phase where unless they really get surprised and JJ's vastly exceeding expectations and this team's doing really well and they truly think it's worth investing in, I think they're going to hang on to those picks, let this ride out, sell some tickets. It'll be like a farewell tour. We're going to get to see Bronny with Bron, and then, then try to rebuild and try to play for the future rather than wasting picks now if they don't believe in what this looks like.
I think it's an incredibly spoiled stance for them to take. The notion that like, oh yeah, we'll just wait for the next LeBron. We'll just wait for the next time we have Anthony Davis in his prime. We'll just wait for the next time that we have both of those guys somehow at the same time.
Out how many years in a row trying to pair someone up with Kobe? Like,
yeah,
you're not, just because you have cap space or just because you're the Lakers doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be able to just grab whoever you want in free agency or trades. And I think, with these CBA restrictions, it makes some of this stuff harder. So I think if they don't develop internally, draft well, get lucky and find that superstar, it's not something we're going to be able to just quickly expedite.
Yeah, I agree. All right, before we get you out of here, I want to get out of the way and let you plug all of the great work that you're doing, whether it's with Lakers Exceptionalism, Basketball Index, all of that good stuff. Tell everybody where to find your work.
Sure. So you can, my handle's on the screen. You can find me at Tim_NBA on Twitter. I'll be tweeting about the Lakers. I'll be tweeting from an X's and O's and data perspective. I am someone who my background is in coaching. It's in data. I'm in kind of like a weird in-between space where I try to mesh those worlds together. And, I'm a Lakers fan. I've been following the team for a while here and want the team to do well. But at the same time, I'm going to try to be honest with you. And honest doesn't mean all positive. Honest doesn't mean all negative. Honest is like, hey, I'm tracking every play. Here's how I'm grading these things. Here's what the facts say. And we're going to follow the facts. And so if that's something you're interested in, you can find my work there for free on Twitter, of course. In addition to that, I have my own podcast with Tom Zayas, and we cover not the league, the Lakers specifically through those lenses. And we'll do a lot on playback with game streams where we'll be, we watch a play, we're going through watching the game, and then it's in a TV timeout. Let's draw up a play on the digital whiteboard and show you what they ran and why it worked. And, by the way, here are 3 clips that I was able to pull where they ran it earlier this year, because I have all of that logged already. So that kind of content, if you want to learn more about the game, I think that's what our niche is trying to fill. If you're interested more in the data side, you can check out my website, Basketball Index. We've been growing and growing, and this past year has been us kind of working on ourselves, working on a lot behind the scenes. We have some really, really good data. We're at a point where our data pipeline is, it's not Tim with a bunch of spreadsheets doing things. It's a bunch of code with automation and everything it should be. We have some really, I'd say, impressive facelifts and new reveals coming up in the next month that you'll want to keep an eye out for, that I think make for a really good enhancement to the user experience from a platform standpoint. So keep an eye out for that. It's the same sort of data that, like, we have front offices, we have agents, we have players, we have coaching staff members, we have people that you'll be very familiar with that are purchasing this stuff and using it for themselves. It's that caliber of stuff. And if you want to be able to get a good feel for how 29 other teams are playing, check it out, because I know I am not going to ever watch a representative sample of other teams to be able to say with confidence, this guy's good at this, that guy's bad at that, and here's exactly how they fit in. So the data is really helpful. We use percentiles, we use letter grades, color coding, all that good stuff. And, if you don't want to pay for that, that's your problem. You can take that up with God. But if you're interested in that sort of stuff, check it out. And if you want to dig deeper into the Lakers exceptionalism hole, we also have a Discord where we got a bunch of sickos just talking about hoops 24/7 and digging into scheme and conspiracy theories with the Lakers and all sorts of different things. So that's what we got going on.
Like I said earlier at the top of the show, it's a really cool community, and succeeding with analytics forward stuff is very, very difficult to do. And all the kudos in the world to you guys for doing it. Tim, this has been an absolute blast, as it always is. And I look forward to hopefully talking to you either before the season kicks off or shortly thereafter to be able to talk about what we're actually seeing from JJ Redick once we finally see it in practice.
Anytime, man. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right, everybody, that is going to do it here for this episode of the Lakers Lounge. Please hit that subscribe button. Please hit that like button. Please review, all of that good stuff. Tell your friend that you love the show. Tell your enemies that you hate it. And until the next time you guys hear from me, I'm Anthony Irwin. That was Tim of Lakers Exceptionalism. Have a great rest of your day. Make somebody else's, and I will talk to you tomorrow.